The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Who needs a damn offseason? Not I. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. Dan Besbris with you here on this Sunday, actually. I think we're putting this one out early. Yeah, this one's going out a little in advance. Something happened over the weekend. I don't know what it was. Something happened over the weekend. Nothing relevant, right? Nothing important happens on the weekend. The NBA is always kind enough to wait until we're back at our e-machines, clicking away to drop whatever large pieces. Oh, right. Yes, of course, Anthony Davis is a Laker. I forgot about that. Oh, yes. This is true. This is neat. So here's what's going on in terms of today's podcast. It's not going to be exactly what you're expecting because today is the Nuggets Post-Mortem as we finish up the Post-Mortem month and a half here at Fantasy NBA Today and Hoop Ball. Tomorrow, Tuesday, I should say, depending on when you're listening to this show, because, again, early release. Tuesday, the Blazers. We flip-flopped some of the last few to get the last two as the finals team, so it's actually the Bucks on Wednesday. They're going early. Warriors Thursday, and then the champion Raptors on Friday. That'll be our last week here on post-mortem stuff. Then we'll do a little bit of NBA draft coverage. You know I'm not going to be a big part of that because I hate rookies. I'm a crotchety old man. And then free agency. It's that close. I mean, you're the week after this one is you talk rookies a little bit. And then free agency. We're going to have a live show on Sunday the 30th as free agency begins. We'll break all that stuff down, whatever deals are announced in the first moments. Again, that's 3 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday, June 30th. They moved the moratorium up. Now, obviously, no one can officially sign until the end of the moratorium, but now we get the rumors that leak out, the Woj bombs of, so-and-so is feeling very comfortable with the decision to sign with blah, 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 where they can't make it official, but it's official. Outside of DeAndre Jordan, he could always go to the Mavericks or the Clippers, depending on what his last desires might be. The reason I bring all of this up is that we're doing a little bit of a twist on today's show. Today's episode, I'm Dan Besbris, by the way, at Dan Besbris on Twitter. This is, of course, a Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee and Hoop Ball presentation. Thank you, Hawaiian Isles, because you're powering this locomotive over here. Those guys are amazing. Not just with their partnership, but also with their actual product. So many folks at Hoop Ball staying awake with Hawaiian Isles and feeling good. The thing we're going to switch up a little bit today is that I think a lot of you probably are tuning into this episode of Fantasy NBA Today expecting a half an hour of Anthony Davis breakdown, and that's just not what it's going to be. We have the Nuggets Post-Mortem. I'm going to touch on Anthony Davis, but if you want the really in-depth stuff, the Hoop Ball Lakers podcast is back. It took about a 4-month hiatus due to some personnel issues, but it's back. It's live. Ethan Noroff is the new host. I did a show with Brewski that's over there, and then I did a show where Ethan is taking the reins now. So there's 2 shows on Anthony Davis that are available at the Hoop Ball Lakers feed. The only information that was not available when those shows were done, at least as of Sunday in the early evening, is the expectation that the trade is going to be executed at the beginning of July instead of later in the month. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of Fantasy NBA Today. Just the new information, but then all of the really intense stuff. Yes, this is a cheap move. You can call me on it. That's fine. You can call me a dick. I don't care. But I really want you guys to check out Hoop Ball Lakers. I think it's a great show with awesome voices and a really cool piece of data, of info, of news to use to kind of bring it back out of retirement. That is very easy to find. You can follow them on Twitter at HoopBallLakers. The link is available at hoop-ball.com. It was retweeted from at HoopBallTweets, at HoopBallFantasy. I retweeted it repeatedly, so it's out there. The other stuff that I'm going to do and this maybe later on in the week or it might be next week, is get into the fantasy ramifications of this because there are going to be some. We don't know a ton right now. Although I'll say right at the moment, the one thing that really jumps out to me is that I am in love with the Boston Celtics fantasy prospects. As a team, I could, a Laker fan, I could care less about how these guys actually do. But from a fantasy standpoint, the fact that they didn't send all their guys for AD and Kyrie is almost definitely gone makes me think, finally, the too many mouths to feed situation is going to start to sort itself out a little bit. This is a glorious development for Boston Celtics fantasy stuff. But that's basically as much as I'm going to get into today, outside of, again, mentioning that we don't really know exactly how all this stuff is going to shake out. On the podcast that we just did over at Hoopball Lakers, we talked a lot about how the target is probably going to be Kemba Walker. And then the news comes out that the trade is going to be executed early, and the Lakers might only have $24 million to spend instead of the closer to 29 or 30 that they need to bring in a Jimmy Butler or a Kemba Walker. But there are all these other weird things on the table that could happen, where they could find a way to trade Mo Wagner, Isaac Bonga, Jamario Jones. That would get them up into the 28 range. They could sign someone like Kemba to a one-year deal and then bump it up hard the following season with non-bird rights when Anthony Davis gets his extension. So there's all these little ways that they can actually kind of sort this thing out. I know one of the other ones is because the number 4 pick right now is considered a zero salary item until the end of July, which, by the way, some of these rules are just so freaking weird and stupid. But anyway, they are what they are. If the Pelicans move the number 4 pick somewhere else for additional assets, they're going to need what's known as trade ballast, which is salary, and that's where those guys like Wagner, Bonga, Jones could get involved. They could get floated out there. They could be used with... let's say the Pelicans trade down. They trade the 4th pick for like the 7th or 8th pick and some player. They'd have to have something to send back. So these are ways the Lakers can move some of those other guys. They can free up space. It's not a done deal. Anthony Davis could still waive his trade kicker, even though it sounds like that's not really the intent right now. The Lakers could potentially add more stuff if they needed to and force the Pelicans to wait until the end of July to execute the trade. None of this stuff is done. So as you go listen to that Hoopball Lakers podcast, just bear in mind the fact that we did not know when recording those episodes that right now it sounds like AD wants to keep his trade kicker and the Pels and Lakers want to execute the trade early. So we were under the assumption they were going to easily get to that max slot. Now it may require some more finagling. Here's the bottom line, though. Everybody's like, well, Lakers they're not going to be able to get another max guy. Nothing is done. Nothing is done. We will find out more in time. We may find out about more guys being moved. We may find out about the trade happening later. All of this stuff remains to be seen, and we will cover all of that at Hoopball Lakers as well. So please go follow that Twitter feed. Go check out the podcast. We had a lot of fun. Again, me, Brewski, Ethan Noroff, who will be now the lead host of the show going forward. It was a blast, and that's where I'm leaving it. If you want to know more about how we feel about the AD stuff, you got to go listen to that. And they're not long. Each one of them, I think one's like 40 minutes and the other's about 30. And you don't even have to listen to them back-to-back. You don't have to listen to them in one sitting. Easy. It's easy. Please go check it out. I beg of you. Yes, I know I'm shilling from a fellow podcast here at Hoopball, but that's what we're doing this time. If you want to hear our thoughts, you got to go check it out. Please and thank you. As my good friend Sean McCall, the broadcaster for the Lake Elsinore Storm, always used to say, please remember to say please and thank you. Thank you. So, the rest of the content for today then becomes the Nuggets. Although, honestly, I haven't done a podcast since the finals ended. It occurs to me that the only show we've had posted here, Adrian and Coach took out Friday last week. They covered the Rockets and the end of the finals. I don't know if you guys care about my thoughts on the finals, since now with this AD stuff, it almost feels like a month ago. But pretty cool. The Toronto Raptors win their first championship in a quarter of a century. So, first. Very good on the Toronto side. Weird and sad times on the Warriors side. Klay Thompson tearing his ACL in that game. Brutal. Going along with the Kevin Durant Achilles injury. Wow. I mean, that is some pretty unbelievable stuff. I on the Durant side, I have pretty different feelings on the two. The Klay Thompson one, he got clipped while going up for a dunk. He landed awkwardly. It popped. I've seen some folks saying the Warriors should be taking some heat for both of the injuries. I'm not sure that that's true. I do think they should take some heat for the Durant one because, we were talking about our tinfoil hat stuff over here, that he was dealing with an Achilles situation anyway for the whole 4 weeks he was out. There was obviously something not right with KD. With Thompson, he was fine. So if you're out there, looking to kind of die on a hill with the Warriors should have taken better care of Klay Thompson, I think that line is foolish. He's a Warrior. He's as a human, not just the team name. He fights through everything, always has. He's extremely tough. He landed super awkwardly. And if you look at a lot of the ACL stuff over the years, it doesn't always necessarily parallel with somebody fighting through, say, a hamstring. I mean, he was fine. Look at the numbers he was putting up. He was fine for multiple games before this injury happened. And they had like a week off between basketball games. So please don't die on that hill. It's bad. It was really bad. With as tough as he is, you might see Thompson playing in February next year. So I think there may be some value actually with the Warriors this coming season. Basically, everybody's like, oh, they're done. They're done. They're cooked. Durant's not going to play. Thompson's not going to play. Steph and Green are not going to carry them to a championship. No, they're not. But Steph and Green can carry them into the playoffs. And as we saw this season, they were the best in the Western Conference even without Kevin Durant. Not better than the Raptors without Kevin Durant, but it was basically a dead heat when Klay was on the floor and healthy. Warriors were, you never know what's going to happen in that ball game, but they appeared to be on their way to sending that thing to a Game 7. It would look like it was going to go 7 games in the Durantless Warriors versus a very good Raptors team. And that's the team that you may see in the playoffs next year. Will he be the same guy? I don't know. But considering the fact that, their odds are going to drop precipitously, they have already, and teams like the Lakers, they're going to go way up through the roof. All of this door is wide open thing is a very reasonable assessment because the Warriors are obviously walking wounded. But to me, they're still the favorite to get out of the West. I think Klay Thompson will play before the playoffs. He's built at a different clip than a lot of these other guys. He's just has superhuman healing abilities, and I'm inclined to think that they may happen again. But that's still really crummy news. Klay was having an unreal game. He was having a fantastic finals. The work he was doing on Kawhi Leonard was actually really impressive. All these things that we talk about with Klay, you saw playoff Warriors, and he was distinctly one of those guys. So crummy end to that. It's amazing how something can be so great on one side for Toronto and so bittersweet on the other. And I know everybody's like, whoa, they beat up on a team that was at half staff or whatever. And yes, I guess that's true, but also the team that wins the finals is often the healthy team. Warriors did it to the Cavs. These things happen. Freak injuries happen. Unfortunately, they were just really big ones for Golden State. Ones that guys can't play through. So that's it. Is the Warriors dynasty over? I don't know. What do I think this means for the team? Well, I'm fairly certain this means Klay is coming back. I thought he was coming back anyway, but now I think it's locked. I think this raises the odds that Kevin Durant comes back with Golden State. I was fairly certain he was gone for this entire season, and I thought there would have to be some monumental turn for him to actually consider coming back with the Warriors. And this is it, the team being decimated by injuries and feeling like, oh, maybe I come back and round it out. We'll run it back in 2 years from now, so go see if we can win it again. I'm not certain. I still think that I think it's a better than 50% chance he's gone because it sounds like, teams like the Knicks, Clippers, whatever, these teams are going to be offering him a very large contract under the assumption that he does come back and plays okay to great, somewhere in that range, once he's ready to go for the 2020-21 NBA campaign. And that's why I talked about on other podcasts, if it's the Knicks, he goes there, they tank for a season, they get a high draft pick to go along with KD coming back from injury. Perhaps they bring in another max guy next offseason. Clippers, maybe they go that same route. Sounds like they want to go big or not at all. That puts them in a weird kind of Lakersian spot. Seeing so many, they've done things so well. If they swing and miss, man, I don't know what that means. Anyway, so that's my assessment of the finals. I still think the Warriors are going to be the best team in the West come playoff time. They're not going to have the best record in the West because Klay's going to miss most of the season. But you're going to see Steph go crazy next year. Fantasy-wise, he's going to be incredible. He and Dre are going to have to play through some stuff next season because they're not going to have that wiggle room to just blow games by resting guys because they're not going to be healthy. And then on the Kawhi thing, I really don't know. It makes almost too much sense for him to just come back and play in Toronto for one more year. We talked about it on this podcast before, and it'll come up again during the Toronto Raptors Redux here on Friday. But the Raptors contract situation is really interesting in that they basically have, let's assume Marc Gasol exercises his $26 million player option. They basically have $105 million tied up already for this coming season. And if they bring back Kawhi, that number is going to jump into the 130s. And the following season, the only player that's actually signed is Norman Powell. They have Lowry's $33 million coming off the books, Gasol's $26, Ibaka's $23, Van Vliet's $9, and then if Kawhi were to re-sign his 30-something, that would all come off the books after next year. So to me, it makes a ton of sense for Kawhi to come back, sign a 1-and-1 situation, player option for that second year with Toronto. We heard rumors that this might happen. It's very logical. You run it back with almost the exact same team. You go find somebody to replace Danny Green, if you can. I'm sure someone like a Damari Carroll's floating around out there. They're not as good, obviously. Sort of a different ability, but it fills a similar role. You run it back. You try to win another championship. If it works, awesome. If it doesn't, fine. Then everybody's gone. Toronto goes into maximum rebuild mode at that point. Maybe Kawhi decides he wants to stay long-term. Maybe he takes his one-year deal. Toronto signs another max. But just run it back. Try to repeat if you're Toronto. But I also fully don't understand Kawhi Leonard. I have no concept for what's going on in that goofy noggin of his. He might be on his way to the Clippers. I don't know. I really don't know what's going on in his dome. I don't think he's going to the Lakers. That's about the only thing that I feel like is basically off the table. But there's all these other places he might just pop up, and now everybody was parsing his words when he was talking about bringing a championship to them, Toronto. He wasn't talking about the Raptors as us. It was them. I think that's just him being weird. He probably said the same stuff about the Spurs, and nobody's pulled that up. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. I mean, he still thinks he's a member of the Spurs. The way his brain is different. He's an incredible basketball player, but he's also a very goofy human being. And so I really don't know. If you're a betting man, I think you put it on the Raptors to start next year. I think he signs a one-year deal. They run it back, bring all these goats back, see what happens. They were obviously pretty damn good come playoff time. You can load manage your way through the regular season and basically dare Milwaukee to figure out the stuff that they couldn't pull off. Patrick McCaw, Jeremy Lin, these guys coming off the books, that doesn't change much. You lose Danny Green's defense, it's a big deal. I mean, he's an outstanding defender. Positionally, he also blocks shots from that guard spot, but this is sort of your last hurrah. If you're Toronto with this potential group, not last hurrah forever, and Masai Ujiri's an incredible leader in the front office, so he'll figure something out. But this would be a pretty easy way to just take out the rubber stamp and send him on back. Let's talk Denver Nuggets. That's today's Post-Mortem. Again, if you want to hear more on the Anthony Davis stuff, you got to go listen to the Hoop Ball Lakers podcast. I'm going to say that repeatedly during today's show. Hoop Ball Lakers. Go check it out on Twitter. Go listen to the podcast. You can find it. It's available. I just was able to find it easily searching for Hoop Ball Los Angeles Lakers. I think I Googled Hoop Ball Los Angeles Lakers, and that podcast popped right up. So you can find it that way as well. Denver Nuggets had a weird fantasy season because, by all accounts, not one player on this team outperformed their expectations. Not one. That is hard to do. Especially hard is to have a team where that happens and for that team to be considered fantasy darlings. Nikola Jokic, she was drafted in the 7 or 8 range and thankfully played 80 games. So by totals, he basically hit his ADP, but by average, he was number 13. He had a very good season, 51% from the field, 82 at the line, 20, 11, and 7, 1.4 steals, not many blocks, and a three-pointer. Great numbers, but not the number 7 guy by averages. Jamal Murray, after a big season where everybody on Denver was hurt, ended up with a down year. Shot just 43.7% from the field, really didn't do much defensively, which never was his calling card anyway, but the dip in free throw and field goal percent pretty much wiped out his gains. Paul Millsap, number 83 in 9-cat. Jamal Murray, by the way, was 78. Paul Millsap, 83 in 9-cat, and seemingly more and more injury-prone as his season trucks along. Still does a little bit of everything. 48% from the field, 73 at the foul line. Not great, but 13, 7, and 2 with a steal. A little over a steal, a little less than a block. He's like a poor man's version of Al Horford. Can you believe they were playing together? It's amazing. Fantasy games have sort of evolved in that same way. Gary Harris, drafted in the 40s, finished in the 160s. Will Barton, drafted in the 50s, finished in the 200s. This is Isaiah Thomas, sometimes drafted, and people held on to him for a year. Finished at number 511 in 12 games. Whoops. Fourth best fantasy player on the Nuggets was Monty Morris. Malik Beasley was the fifth best. Mason Plumlee was the sixth most important fantasy player on this team. By the way, all those 3 guys all played over 80 games, so there is something to that. But Denver went through a crazy season of having a very clear-cut Jokic, Murray, Millsap, Harris, Barton. These 5 guys were going to be obvious fantasy juggernauts, or good at the very least. And then when Harris and Barton got hurt, Beasley and Morris played their way into more minutes, and that never really changed. The minutes did peter out for those guys, but then once everybody was healthy, it just wiped out all 4 of them. None of those guys ended up with fantasy value down the stretch. Jamal Murray is a guy I took some heat for, and rightfully so, because last season I said I wasn't touching him. I didn't like his fantasy game. I still don't, by the way. And then obviously, by not grabbing him anywhere, we missed out on that top 50 season. And I have to admit, over the course of that year, at some point I kind of said, you know what, maybe he really has taken this giant leap forward. Maybe he is a 45% field goal guy. Maybe he will shoot 91% at the free throw line. Maybe he really can do this even once this team starts to get healthy again. But what we saw this year was that some of what he did the previous season was just a byproduct of kind of shooting over his head a little bit. And so then, as we all started to buy into it, then he had a down year. I think the final Jamal Murray is going to be somewhere in between those two. Because I do think that his free throw percentage will be better next year. There's no reason why he should have shot his career low this last season. He's never going to be a steals or blocks guy, but he's on the floor long enough to get about a steal a game. Fear, obviously, is that if Denver, heaven forbid, they ever actually stay healthy, he's not going to take 20 shots a game when everybody's out on the floor, but when they are banged up, he might. There's a little bit of an as he goes, so go the Nuggets thing. He kind of is their offensive engine, which is weird to think because I know Jokic is the guy where everything originates, but if Jamal Murray is cold, they're probably not winning the important games. You saw it in the playoffs. When he played well, they won. Look at that Portland series. That one went 7 games. In the 3 games Denver won, Jamal Murray shot 53%, 50%, and 44%. That was 7 out of 16, so he was a bucket away from 50%. In the games they lost in that series, he shot 6 out of 18, 14 for 32, which is not bad, by the way, on 32 shots. That was that crazy, 9 overtime game. 7 for 20 and 4 out of 18. So brutally bad shooting games in 3 of the games of the 4 that they lost. And then in 2 of the 3 that they won, he was very good. And in the third one, in 1 of the games they won and in 1 of the games they lost, he was sort of fine. He shot that same percentage, which is 7/16, about 44%. Acceptable. Makes sense. The team went 50-50 in the games where he was okay. They won all the games where he was very good, and they lost all the games where he was bad. It's weird to think that that's what Denver kind of came down to, but with Gary Harris's offense abandoning him, Will Barton's offense largely abandoning. He had, I think, one pretty good game in that series, but overall, he was not really a huge factor. It was Jokic, who they could basically count on every game, and then the ups and downs of the mighty Jamal Murray. From a fantasy standpoint, I still think these guys have the name power where they're not going to fall far enough. I think Jokic is going to get drafted towards the end of the first round. Although, we do have to see how movement creates stuff. Kevin Durant being out, that wipes out one first-rounder. AD moving teams, does that change things much for him? Is there anybody, Dame, who's always right around the turn, does he get a bump after a nice year? Little things like that. I think we can still safely say Jokic is going to go first round at some point. Middle to end of it, somewhere in there. So, fine. I think that's a pretty safe middle to late first round pick, but if you were expecting him to make a leap into the top 5, I don't know. I don't know where the magic happens. He had an unbelievable year. Jamal Murray, I think he finishes higher than 78 next year, mostly just because I think his free throw number is a little bit higher. But I also don't think he gets up into that top 40 range because he's basically going to need to add something. It's going to have to be, a half a steal or 2.5 field goal percent on top of the other stuff. And maybe the field goal percent does come back up again, but I think he's going to get overdrafted. Someone's going to take him at 50. I would take him in the 60s or 70s. That's a very safe place to get him in the 60s. I think that's probably where he ends up. Paul Millsap might be the one guy on this team where you look at it and you're like, yeah, I could see him falling. And maybe he should, because he's not that much younger than me, which means he's kind of old. He's 34 right now. He'll turn 35 right around the All-Star break next year. So he'll be 34 on opening day and for, 70% of the season. Opportunity-wise, he attempted fewer than 10 shots per game for the first time since 2009. That just tells you that he's not a focal point on offense anymore. But he's still doing the little stuff. He's still averaging 2 combined defensive stats per game without trucking you in free throw percent. He's not horrible there. And his field goal number is still fine. So to me, and on Yahoo, he has center eligibility. So I think on Yahoo is actually a pretty safe second center. I think he's safely going to fall in between 70 and 100. The guys that feel like they almost have to fall like boulders in the ocean are Will Barton and Gary Harris. Because people spent high picks on these guys, and they were atrocious. Gary Harris, as we mentioned, he was drafted around 40. He finished outside the top 150. Only played in 57 games as well. 13 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, a steal, 1.5 3-pointers. Just 42.5% shooting from the field. That is basically the worst since he's been a factor in the NBA, and not close. Worst by a long shot. Worst 3-point shooting team for him, season for him since his rookie year. Foul shooting was basically right around his career mark, but everything else was brutally bad. He is due for a massive bounce back. I don't know where he's going to get drafted. It's not going to be in the 30s and 40s again. So I think you can mark yourself, will Gary Harris fall down near that 75 or later range? And if he does, you scoop him up. because at full strength, he is still better than the guys he's in front of. Sorry to, Malik Beasley and Monty Morris, who had really nice seasons. Gary Harris is better. You started to see a little bit of it towards the end of the year and into the playoffs. There were just these little hints that he was feeling like himself. He is a bit injury prone. He's never played. He played 76 games his second season in the NBA, but the other ones are 55, 57, 67, and 57. So if you're drafting him, you have to assume he's going to miss some time. And then Will Barton is the other question mark. Can he get back to being himself? I honestly don't know. His job was basically to be a gunner off the bench for this team, and he solidified that role last year when he and Jamal Murray were basically the only people standing. They didn't have the deep bench last season. Not this most recent one, but the previous year. They didn't have the deep bench. Guys were out. And so he and Jamal Murray just had a ton of shots. If he doesn't have a ton of shots, can he create that same level of value? And the answer seemingly is not really. I don't think that Will Barton gets anywhere near the numbers he put up 2 seasons ago at 16, 5, and 4 with a steal and 2 3-pointers, because I don't think he's taken 13 shots a game going forward. Unless they thin the herd a little bit, unless somebody gets traded from this Denver roster. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know either way. I have no thoughts on that. 50-50. Could happen, might not happen. As it stands right now, I don't see him shooting all the way back up the charts. He's a guy that is going to get drafted a lot later, though. So, there's something there where, what if he does fall towards the 100 mark? Fine, take a shot on him then. Paul Millsap might not be back with Denver. I believe his year here is a team option. And so that's, again, where one of the contracts things comes over my head. So that could change things, obviously, in a big way. The fact that we haven't heard about Denver being a large player in free agency leads me to believe that they might just pick it up. Or, conversely, his salary has them so far over the cap at $121 that even if he does come off the books, they're still not going to be anywhere near the amount of money it would take to sign a max guy. So now Denver has to make this call of, hey, do we bring back Millsap at his really high rate and just stay over, or do we renounce it and then we've got $13, $14 million to spend on some fringy guy? So there's your question mark. But still, Jokic, Harris, Plumlee, Barton, Murray, Beasley, Morris, these guys are still on contract. And obviously, we're coming up on free agency now, so we'll learn a little bit more at that point. But in terms of arrow up or arrow down for me, as I stare at this team, I think Jokic, safe. You can say no arrow there. He's just a dash. Jamal Murray, slightly undervalued. Paul Millsap, probably fairly undervalued. I wouldn't be surprised if he fell into the hundreds, even if he's back with his team. Gary Harris is going to be undervalued by a lot. Will Barton, ever so slightly undervalued, but not a guy that I'm champing at the bit to go grab. And then the other guys I'm not drafting. So there are potentially some values with this team. The question really is, what does the name recognition do? What is the fact that Denver had a really good season and Jokic gets a lot of play? Is that going to artificially bump their ADPs too early? Is Murray still going to go near 50? Is Millsap still going to go near 75? Are Harris and Barton going to go in the 50s and 60s instead of falling 2 or 3 more rounds? If those guys go early, I'm okay with missing out on it. I just think that there's a non-zero chance with this team, a better than nominal chance that Millsap, Harris fall in a way that allows you to get these limited upside guys, but very safe, plodding guys that should be inside the top 100, even on a per-game basis for your roto team. You fill out your games played. If you fill out your games played with guys posting, top 75-ish kind of value that you grabbed late, that really, it affords you so much wiggle room, and they end up being fantastic trade fodder, too. You take your third-round pick, you package him with like a Millsap who's posting, say, top 80 value at the time, and you turn him into a second-rounder. These little things, they end up as massive boosts to your team. Then you can go free agent hunting. One other note, I did not realize that the Denver Nuggets had a player on their team named Thomas Welsh, who goes by T. Welsh, obviously, in anything that abbreviates the first name. So every time I look at their roster now, I think of the Welsh. So the Welsh, thinking about you here as we do our Denver Nuggets post-mortem. Again, coming up the rest of the week, the Blazers, Tuesday, Bucks, Wednesday, Warriors, Thursday, Raptors wrapping up post-mortem season on Friday. If you want to know more about our thoughts on Anthony Davis, please, once again, I beg of you, I instruct you, I implore you, go check out Hoopball Lakers. 2 recent podcasts on the Anthony Davis trade and more to come. I'll talk to Neil Rochlani about the Blazers on our next episode. This is Dan Besbris for Fantasy NBA Today. Thank you again to our buddies at HawaiianIsles.com. Check them out. Go to Amazon.com and search for Hawaiian Isles if you want to get that joint sent to your doorstep. Prime. And with that, officially, the off-season has begun. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.